The road was nearly empty that night. A few cars passed, headlights bouncing off the wet asphalt. The streetlights above flickered, casting long shadows across the stretch of Highway 20 just outside Tucson, Arizona. It was late, just past 11 p.m., that hour when most people wanted nothing more than to get home. Captain Naomi Carter, 42, had been driving for nearly 2 hours after visiting her sister in Sierra Vista. Her fingers tapped lightly on the wheel, keeping time with a soft blues melody floating through her speakers. She wore no uniform, just a plain gray hoodie, jeans, and sneakers. Her dark, curly hair was pulled into a loose ponytail. Flashing red and blue lights appeared in her rearview mirror, closing in fast. Her stomach clenched, not in fear, but fatigue. She knew this game. She signaled, switched lanes, and eased onto the shoulder. She put her car in park, took a deep breath, and placed both hands on the wheel, visible. A white patrol car stopped behind her. The officer took his time exiting, his steps heavy and deliberate. Boots scraped pavement. One hand on his belt, the other gripping a flashlight. Naomi watched him through the side mirror as he approached. His badge caught the light. Officer T. Holbrook. License and registration. No greeting, just authority, flat and practiced. Naomi met his gaze in the mirror, then slowly retrieved the documents from her glove box. "Was I speeding, officer?" He didn't answer. Took the taillights out. She frowned. "That can't be right." He looked at her. "You arguing with me?" There it was, that subtle shift, the line between calm and confrontation. Naomi had seen it before, both in war zones and boardrooms. A man testing the boundary, expecting submission. She stayed calm, stepped out of the vehicle. His tone snapped like a whip. She blinked. "Can I ask why?" He tilted his head, a smirk pulling at the corners of his mouth. "Because I said so." A second passed. Then she unbuckled her seatbelt and stepped into the cool desert air. Her posture was relaxed, but trained, confident, unthreatening. Still, she wouldn't be pushed. Holbrook stepped back, assessing her, measuring how much control he could take. "Turn around, hands on the car." She hesitated. For what reason? His smirk vanished. "You resisting?" "No, I'm asking a question." A flicker of something passed his face. Irritation? Amusement? Both. Then he reached for his radio. "Got a non-compliant female here," he said quietly. Then louder, "Turn around." Naomi's pulse quickened, but her face stayed neutral. "Officer, I know my rights. I know what I'm allowed to do and what you can't." His jaw clenched. "You're under arrest." He lunged for her wrist. She stepped back. "Obstructing an officer." She exhaled through her nose. So that was his move. Her military instincts kicked in. Breath slow, pulse steady. She calculated quickly. Resist and risk escalation. Comply and fight it later. With steady movement, she turned and placed her hands on the hood of her car. It was cold against her skin. Holbrook yanked her arms behind her, clamping on the cuffs far too tight. Then he shoved her toward his cruiser. "You don't know who you—" He sneered. "Oh, I know exactly who I'm dealing with." But he didn't, not even close. In the back of the patrol car, Naomi sat upright. The hard plastic dug into her spine, and the cuffs cut into her wrists. Still, she kept calm. Outside, Holbrook strutted around like a man who believed he'd won. But he hadn't. She wasn't just a black woman he could intimidate. She was a decorated military officer, a captain in the U.S. Air Force. And by the time she walked into that courtroom 3 weeks later, in a tailored blazer and heels, flanked by attorneys, Officer Holbrook realized just how badly he'd misjudged her. Because Naomi Carter didn't just walk in to defend herself, she walked in to destroy his career. Naomi Carter had a choice: comply and fight later, or push back and risk becoming another statistic. She wasn't about to take the second option. With slow, deliberate movements, the 42-year-old Air Force captain placed her hands on the roof of her car. The metal was cool beneath her palms, grounding. Officer Holbrook wasted no time. He yanked her arms behind her, snapping the cuffs on too tight, then shoved her roughly toward the patrol car. "You don't know what you're doing," Naomi murmured, not flinching. Holbrook chuckled darkly, guiding her to the back seat. "Lady, I know exactly what I'm doing." But he didn't, not even close. The hard plastic seat dug into Naomi's back as she sat stiffly, her wrists already aching. Her breathing was steady, measured. The door slammed shut behind her, sealing her in. Outside, she saw Holbrook strut back to his vehicle, smirking as he muttered something into his radio. She turned her eyes to the partition window. Her reflection looked calm, composed, but beneath the surface, something simmered. She'd endured combat drills, high-pressure operations, and interrogations overseas. But this was different. This was a man with unchecked power, emboldened by a badge and the darkness of a deserted road. A man who thought no one would ever challenge him. Minutes passed, then 5, then 10. Naomi subtly shifted her wrists, testing the cuffs. Still tight, purposefully so. Holbrook wanted her to feel small. He wanted her to feel pain. Then the driver's side door swung open. Holbrook slid in, whistling a low, off-key tune. He fastened his seatbelt like nothing was wrong. "Well, well," he muttered, "let's take a little ride." Naomi didn't respond. Her eyes remained forward. He pulled onto the road, patrol lights still flashing, red and blue staining the highway behind them. The cruiser lurched forward. "You know," Holbrook said after a beat, "most people just shut up and do what they're told." Naomi exhaled slowly through her nose. "And most officers don't arrest people for questioning a traffic stop." Holbrook laughed. "Lady, you must really think you're somebody." She met his eyes in the rearview mirror. "I don't think I am. I know I am." He paused, just for a second. His knuckles flexed around the steering wheel. Irritation flickered across his face, but he masked it quickly. "You military?" he asked, tone shifting to something more guarded. She didn't answer. "Yeah, I figured," he continued. "You got that attitude. Think you're above the law. Thought I'd back off when you threw that around, huh?" Still, she said nothing. He clicked his tongue. "Shame. If you just kept your mouth shut, we could have avoided all this." Her jaw tightened. The arrogance in his voice made her skin crawl, as if his abuse of power was her fault. Up ahead, the station came into view. A squat brick building off a dark main road. Empty lot, quiet. No one else being processed at this hour. Just her. Holbrook pulled into a space labeled "Police Use Only." He cut the engine, then turned to face her through the partition. "Gotta say," he smirked, "I love when they make it easy." Before Naomi could respond, he was out of the vehicle. Her door opened a second later. "Let's go." She twisted her wrists slightly as she stood. He hadn't loosened the cuffs. Her skin throbbed. Still, she held her head high as he led her inside. They passed a bored desk sergeant. No questions, no eye contact, just routine. The holding area reeked of sweat and bad coffee. A metal bench lined one wall. A steel door led to the cells. Holbrook uncuffed her, just long enough to push her through booking. Fingerprints, mugshot, forms signed without explanation. The officers barely looked at her. She recognized the look in their eyes. Numbness, apathy. The kind that allowed men like Holbrook to operate freely. When it was done, Holbrook grabbed her wrist again. "You think you're smart, huh?" he muttered. Naomi glanced at him sideways. "I don't have to think." His grip tightened. That had hit a nerve. "Enjoy your stay," he sneered, shoving her toward the cell door. She stumbled slightly but caught herself. The metal bars slid shut with a heavy clang. Holbrook tapped them with his fingers like a game show buzzer before striding away. Click. She exhaled. The bench was cold beneath her as she sank down, the chill seeping through her jeans. One night. That's all it would take. Because Holbrook had no idea who he'd just arrested. And by the time she walked back into that world with lawyers, rank, and receipts, he'd learn a lesson he would never forget. Captain Naomi Carter rolled her shoulders, trying to ease the stiffness creeping into her muscles. The cell was small, its pale concrete walls bathed in the weak flicker of a faulty ceiling light. It reeked faintly of old sweat and industrial disinfectant. She'd spent nights in worse places, dusty bunkers under fire in Kandahar, humid tents in Ghana where danger lurked just beyond the canvas walls. This wasn't discomfort, it was insult. Through the bars, Naomi could hear the dull murmur of voices at the front desk, the occasional shuffle of paperwork, the clink of a coffee cup meeting a desk. She exhaled slowly. Control the breath, control the mind. Basic training burned into her long before she ever wore her first uniform. Then came the footsteps, slow, deliberate, entitled. She knew them before he even came into view. Officer Holbrook. That same cocky strut, like he believed nothing could touch him. He appeared in front of her cell, arms crossed, that familiar smirk creeping across his face. Comfy? She didn't answer. He stepped closer to the bars, head tilted. You know, if you just played along, you wouldn't be in here right now. A slow smile crept onto her lips. Oh, Officer Holbrook, I'm exactly where I need to be. His smirk faltered, just for a heartbeat. She caught it. Annoyance? Uncertainty? Maybe both. But he masked it quickly, scoffing as he glanced around the empty holding area. No one's coming to get you tonight, he said with a shrug. Guess that means you'll have some time to think about that attitude. Naomi said nothing, just stared, still, unshaken. Holbrook leaned in slightly. See, here's the thing. People like you think rules don't apply. You think a little rank, a little confidence is enough to get out of trouble. She let him ramble. He was still under the illusion that he had the power. Then, right on cue, a younger officer approached. Late 20s maybe, clipboard in hand. He hesitated at the cell door. Sergeant, he began, voice uncertain. We just got a call. You might want to come take it. Holbrook barely turned. From who? The officer shifted awkwardly. Someone from the base and a federal attorney. They're asking questions. Holbrook's brow furrowed. He threw one last look Naomi's way, then stalked off. She leaned back against the wall, letting his footsteps fade. She caught snippets of conversation. Military liaison, wrongful arrest, federal inquiry. Holbrook's voice dropped low, tight with frustration. The younger officer stammered a reply. Then, stomping boots, Holbrook returned, fuming, jaw tight. What the hell did you do? Naomi leaned forward, resting her elbows on her knees. Me, she said coolly. I didn't do anything. She smiled faintly. But I've got friends, and some of them make very important phone calls. His face twisted. She saw it clearly now, the shift, his confidence cracking, the realization hitting him. He'd messed with the wrong woman. He turned abruptly and stormed down the hall. Naomi exhaled. It wouldn't be long now. When the truth came out, Holbrook was going to regret every second of the last 12 hours. The next morning, sunlight spilled through the narrow windows of the Tucson Municipal Courthouse. The air inside was frigid, too clean, too bright. Naomi stood at the defendant's table, back straight, shoulders squared. No orange jumpsuit, no cuffs, just a crisp navy blazer, charcoal slacks, and that same steady gaze that once calmed junior officers before missions. Beside her, Carla Whitman, her attorney, flipped through a thick folder. Efficient, sharp, ruthless when necessary. Naomi appreciated that. The courtroom slowly filled. Clerks, a few reporters, local observers. Then, the heavy wooden doors opened again. Holbrook walked in, still wearing his badge, still puffed up. But Naomi saw the difference immediately. His chin not quite as high, his stride not quite as sure. A flicker of doubt lingered in his eyes. She caught them. He looked away first. "Good." The judge entered. "Court is now in session," called the bailiff. "Honorable Judge Alan Kirkland presiding." The room fell silent. Judge Kirkland, a gray-haired man with half-moon glasses and an air of weary professionalism, settled in behind the bench. He gave the case files a brief glance before speaking. "All right," he said, adjusting his glasses. "Let's get to it." The prosecutor, a man in his 50s with a salt and pepper beard, stood and cleared his throat. "Your Honor, we are recommending immediate dismissal of all charges against Captain Naomi Carter. Based on evidence submitted overnight, including dashcam footage and federal communication logs, it's clear the arrest was not only improper, but egregiously mishandled." Carla spoke next, calm but firm. "Furthermore, Your Honor, we'll be filing a formal civil rights violation case and requesting internal review of the arresting officer's conduct." The judge nodded grimly. "I've reviewed the footage," he said. "Captain Carter, you are free to go." Naomi gave a single respectful nod. "Thank you, Your Honor." As she turned to leave, she passed Holbrook, now sitting stiffly behind the prosecutor's desk. Their eyes met one final time. This time, it was he who looked afraid. "Your Honor," the prosecutor began, rising with a stack of papers in hand, "we have reason to believe that the defendant, Captain Naomi Carter, was unlawfully detained without probable cause. Furthermore, new information suggests a disturbing pattern of misconduct involving the arresting officer, Sergeant Kyle Holbrook." A low murmur rippled through the courtroom. Holbrook, sitting stiffly beside the city attorney, clenched his jaw. Judge Alan Kirkland peered over his glasses. "Sergeant Holbrook, would you care to explain?" Holbrook leaned forward. "Your Honor, the defendant was uncooperative during a standard traffic stop." The prosecutor cut him off, lifting a document from the table. "Uncooperative?" Captain Carter's record shows a distinguished military career. Naval Academy graduate, multiple commendations, no criminal history, and not a single outstanding citation. You're telling us that a decorated officer was such a threat over a broken taillight that you felt the need to arrest her? Holbrook opened his mouth, then shut it. The silence in the courtroom grew heavy. The prosecutor pressed on. "In addition, an internal review of your stop history shows a disproportionate number of your traffic citations involve black drivers, far above the district average." A wave of uncomfortable murmurs swept through the rows of spectators. Holbrook's face turned a deeper shade of red. Judge Kirkland set his file down and exhaled. "Sergeant, I don't like what I'm hearing." "She resisted," Holbrook muttered. The prosecutor raised a brow. "The body cam footage says otherwise." Kirkland nodded toward the bailiff. "Let's watch it." A screen lowered at the front of the courtroom. Naomi didn't turn to watch. She didn't need to. She had lived it. The footage played. Holbrook barking commands. Her calm voice. His smirk. The forceful way he twisted her arms. The cuffs that bit into her skin. The escalation that never should have happened. Silence fell when the video ended. Judge Kirkland leaned forward, his tone cool. "Sergeant Holbrook, you violated department protocol. You conducted an unlawful arrest and failed to disclose the full details in your report. The charges against Captain Carter are hereby dismissed." He brought the gavel down with a sharp crack. "I also recommend an immediate internal investigation into Sergeant Holbrook's conduct." The tension snapped like a stretched cord. Holbrook's face looked as if it had been struck. His hands clenched into fists on the table. Naomi gathered her belongings with calm precision. She glanced at Holbrook one last time. Their eyes met. No words were needed. This time, she wasn't the one fighting for her name. He was. Holbrook stormed out of the courtroom, his boots echoing loudly down the polished hallway. His jaw was tight, his neck rigid. Reporters lined the exit, cameras and phones angled toward him. He wasn't used to this. He was used to control, to silence, to being the authority in the room. But now, the power he had wielded so carelessly felt like sand slipping between his fingers. Then came the voice. Sergeant Holbrook. It cut through the noise like a blade. He turned sharply. Chief Eldon Baker stood nearby, arms folded across his chest, eyes unreadable. A 30-year veteran of the Tucson Police Department, Baker's word carried weight. "Sir," Holbrook muttered.
"Follow me," Baker said. They stepped into a nearby office. The moment the door shut, the chief's voice dropped into steel. "What the hell were you thinking?" "I was doing my job," Holbrook snapped. "Your job?" Baker barked, tossing a thick file onto the desk. "That's not what it looks like from here. The footage, your history, the fact that you didn't even know who you were arresting?" Holbrook's nostrils flared. "What does that have to do with anything?" Baker leaned forward, voice low but cutting. "Everything. This wasn't some random civilian. This was a high-ranking officer with ties to the Department of Defense. You think this just disappears?" Holbrook looked away, grinding his teeth. "She was disrespectful. She questioned me." "She questioned you?" Baker repeated, eyebrows raised. "That's not a crime, Kyle." Holbrook shook his head. "You don't get it. People like that." The air changed. The chief's voice turned to ice. "People like what?" Silence. Holbrook didn't answer. Baker didn't blink. "You're on desk duty, effective immediately. And if this investigation confirms what I think it will, you won't be wearing that badge much longer." He turned and walked out of the room without waiting for a response. Meanwhile, Naomi Carter walked through the courthouse doors, head high, blazer sharp, steps even. Reporters swarmed, but she kept walking. She didn't need to explain herself. The truth had already done that for her. And justice, for once, had done its job. Sergeant Kyle Holbrook swallowed hard, but said nothing. Chief Eldon Baker sighed, rubbing his forehead. "The district attorney is reviewing every single one of your cases from the past 5 years. You've been flagged for racial profiling, and you better believe this department isn't going down with you." His stomach twisted. "What does that mean?" Baker straightened, his tone firm. "It means you're being placed on immediate suspension, effective now. Internal Affairs is investigating, and if they find what I think they're going to find," he shook his head, "your career is over." Hit Holbrook like a punch to the gut, his face flushed with heat. "This is—" "Don't finish that sentence," Baker snapped. His voice was ice. "Pack up your desk, and if I were you, I'd get a lawyer." Holbrook stood motionless, fists clenched at his sides as the world around him unraveled. For the first time in his career, he realized he wasn't untouchable. Across town, Captain Naomi Carter sat in a quiet cafe just off Speedway Boulevard in Tucson, Arizona. The sunlight filtered in through the wide windows, catching in her coffee as she stirred it absently with a spoon. On the screen of her phone, headlines scrolled by. "Navy officer wrongfully arrested. Tucson cop under investigation. Body cam footage sparks outrage." None of it surprised her. She'd known the moment she stepped out of her car that night how it would play out. She had seen men like Holbrook before, arrogant, entitled, used to bending the law to their liking. But this time, he had picked the wrong woman. Her phone buzzed, a message from her attorney. "Holbrook's been suspended. Charges might follow." Naomi took a slow sip of her coffee. Good. Outside, the city moved on. People strolled past the windows. Cars buzzed down the street. The world didn't stop for injustice.
but sometimes it paused long enough to notice. This wasn't the end of the fight, not for her, not for the people Holbrook had no doubt targeted before. But today was a win. She pushed the door open and stepped out into the cool post-rain air. The sidewalks glistened in the sun. She adjusted her coat and kept walking. Her phone rang. She glanced at the screen. A familiar number. She sighed and answered. "Captain Carter?" "Lieutenant Commander," came the steady voice on the other end. It was her commanding officer back at the naval base. "I assume you've seen the news." "I have." A brief pause. "And how are you feeling?" Naomi caught her reflection in the window of a nearby storefront. Shoulders back, face calm. No signs of defeat. "I feel like I did what I was supposed to do," she said.
"That's what I thought you'd say." A pause. Then, "The Department of Defense has taken an interest in your case. Don't be surprised if someone reaches out. They may want you to speak publicly." Naomi exhaled slowly through her nose. "Not sure I'm interested in being a headline." "You already are," the voice countered gently. "And whether you like it or not, what happened to you is part of a much larger story." She knew that. She had always known it. Holbrook wasn't unique. He was a symptom of a system that had operated with impunity for too long. And as much as this had been about her, it had also been about the dozens, maybe hundreds of others who never got to fight back, who didn't have the rank, the legal support, or the voice. Naomi leaned against a street lamp, watching the traffic roll past. "This isn't the first time this has happened," she said, "and it won't be the last." "No," her captain agreed, "but it's the first time Holbrook is facing consequences, and it's because you didn't back down." Naomi closed her eyes, letting those words land. She didn't back down. Not when he stopped her, not when he barked orders, not when he twisted her wrists into cuffs and shoved her into the back of a squad car. Not even when she spent a night in a holding cell, her reputation hanging in the balance. She stayed firm, and now she had won. "One more thing," the captain added. "You might be getting a call from the mayor's office." Naomi raised an eyebrow. "Oh, apparently they want to recognize you for your professionalism and grace under pressure." She smirked. "Now that's ironic." The captain chuckled. "You going to accept it?" Naomi considered it. "I'll think about it." She ended the call and slid the phone into her coat pocket. Across the street, a mother walked hand in hand with her young son. He was laughing about something, completely carefree. Naomi watched them for a moment. That boy, that's who she'd fought for too. Not just herself, but every black boy and girl who deserved a world where a badge didn't mean unchecked power. A world where dignity didn't have to be earned over and over. She took a deep breath and stepped into the flow of the crowd, head high. Because this fight, it had never just been hers. Power left unchecked is power abused. What happened to Naomi Carter happens to people every day. People without rank, without legal backup, without a camera to prove their story. That's why it matters to speak up, to demand reform, to refuse silence. If this story made you think, share it. If it made you angry, talk about it. And if it reminded you how much work is left to do, stay engaged. Because real change doesn't start with a headline, it starts with you. The story of Captain Naomi Carter is a poignant reminder that standing up against injustice, even when the odds are stacked against you, can create lasting change. It teaches us that silence in the face of abuse enables wrongdoing, but courage, dignity, and truth can disrupt even the most entrenched systems of power. Naomi didn't fight back with anger or violence. She used her composure, her training, and her voice. That alone reminds us that strength doesn't always look loud. It often looks calm, grounded, and unshaken. Her experience also sheds light on how power, when unchecked, becomes dangerous. But more importantly, it shows that power can be held accountable when people refuse to look away or remain silent.
The story also emphasizes the role of allies, people in leadership, in media, or in law who choose to act when they see injustice. While Naomi had the rank and background to defend herself, many do not. That's why her victory is not just personal, it's symbolic. It urges each of us to stand firm in our values, to speak up for those who can't, and to believe that even small acts of resistance against corruption or discrimination can ripple outward. Change starts with one person saying, "This isn't right." If you found this video helpful or thought-provoking, don't forget to give it a thumbs up. It really helps more people discover our content. And if you haven't already, hit that subscribe button and turn on notifications so you never miss the latest updates from our channel. Thanks for watching. We will see you in the next videos.